everyone. I want to talk about Majjima Nikaya number 19, which is called Two Kinds of Thoughts. And I have a little screen share. Let me get that up. Okay, so I'll just read it to you. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's park. There he addressed the bhikkhus thus. Bhikkhus, Venerable Sir, they replied. The Blessed One said this. Bhikkhus, before my enlightenment, while I was still only an unenlightened bodhisattva, it occurred to me, suppose that I divide my thoughts into two classes. Then I set on one side thoughts of sensual desire, thoughts of ill will, and thoughts of cruelty. And I set on the other side thoughts of renunciation, thoughts of non-ill will, and thoughts of non-cruelty. So non-ill will is metta, loving friendliness, and non-cruelty is compassion, karuna. As I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of sensual desire arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of sensual desire has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from nibbana. When I considered, this leads to my own affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered, this leads to others' affliction, it subsided in me. When I considered, this leads to the affliction of both, it subsided in me. When I considered, this obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from nibbana, it subsided in me. Whenever a thought of sensual desire arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. So I'll just make some comments on this because, of course, there's a sort of a continuum of how much we let go of desires depending on where we are on the path. So if we're embracing the Buddhist path to the fullest extent, then we're getting by with the bare necessities of life. And we're not looking to the sensory world for pleasures. We're getting those we're cultivating those from within ourselves. So it's not dependent on external conditions. The happiness is arising from within. So most of us in the household life are still engaged in pursuing pleasures in the sensory world. So when we read this, we need to modify this somewhat. And then also a word of caution. We don't want to be renouncing all of the sensory pleasures of the world until we've developed, until we're receiving that bliss or that happiness from within. Because if you're not getting that bliss or happiness from within, I mean, the whole point of the Buddha's teaching is to let go of suffering. And what happens when you let go of suffering? Well, there's happiness. So basically the Buddhist teaching is to pursue happiness. But the Buddhists discovered that the lasting happiness comes from developing that from within, because our external conditions are impermanent, changing all the time, and so they're temporary at the best. But if we give up our sensory pleasures before we've developed this internal one, then you're just condemning yourself to a pretty miserable existence. So, don't do that. So what we want to do is, when we look at sensual desires that arise, and this goes back to our teaching from a few weeks ago, is this wholesome or is it unwholesome? So if it's going to cause you harm because it's going to cost too much money, or cause you a headache because of all the maintenance required, or blah, 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 all the other problems that come with it, well then, drop it. But if it's not going to cause harm to yourself, not going to cause harms to others, or to both of you, and it's reasonable within your budget, etc., then you can embrace it. So then he goes on. As I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of ill will arose in me. And then later, a thought of cruelty arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of ill will or this thought of cruelty has arisen in me. This leads to my own affliction, to others' affliction, and to the affliction of both. It obstructs wisdom, causes difficulties, and leads away from nibbana. When I considered thus, it subsided in me. Whenever a thought of ill will or cruelty arose in me, I abandoned it, removed it, did away with it. And I think I made notes on this. Okay, so here's the main things you want to consider. Is it leading to some kind of difficulties for you, financial or effort-wise or whatever, or is it going to cause harm to others or to both? Bhikkhus, whenever a bhikkhu frequently thinks and ponders thus, so we can put in the word meditators there, meditators, whatever a bhikkhu frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of their mind. So this is a really important phrase here. I'll read it again. Whatever a person thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of their mind. So if you're always focusing on the cup half empty and you're fussing and ranting about things, that's where your mind's going to go. So if we're trying to train our minds to let go of suffering, this is not what we want to do. If one frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of sensual desire, then you have abandoned the thought of renunciation. And you've abandoned it in order to cultivate the thought of sensual desire. And then your mind inclines to thoughts of sensual desire. If you frequently think and ponder upon thoughts of ill will or thoughts of cruelty, then you've abandoned the thoughts of metta and compassion in order to cultivate the thoughts of ill will and cruelty. And then your mind inclines to thoughts of ill will and cruelty. Then he gives an analogy here. Just as in the last month of the rainy season, in the autumn, when the crops thicken, a cowherd would guard his cows by constantly tapping and poking them on this side and that with a stick to check and curb them. Why is that? Because he sees that he could be flogged, imprisoned, fined, or blamed if he let them stray into the crops. So too, I saw in unwholesome states danger, degradation, and defilement, and in wholesome states the blessing of renunciation, the aspect of cleansing. So he's saying at this stage, when these thoughts are arising in us, then we've got to be really diligent, and we have to be making a lot of effort to curb those thoughts. As I abided thus, diligent, ardent, and resolute, a thought of renunciation arose in me. I understood thus, this thought of renunciation has arisen in me. This does not lead to my affliction or to others' affliction or to the affliction of both. It aids wisdom, does not cause difficulties, and leads to nibbana. If I think and ponder upon this thought, even for a night, even for a day, even for a night and day, I see nothing to fear from it. But with excessive thinking and pondering, I might tire my body. And when this body is tired, the mind becomes disturbed. And when the mind is disturbed, it is far from stillness. So I steadied my mind internally, quieted it, brought it to singleness, and brought it to stillness. Why is that? So that my mind would not be disturbed. And then he does the same thing for thoughts of ill will, of non-ill will, that's metta, and of non-cruelty, which is compassion. So he understood thus, this does not lead to my own affliction or to others' affliction or to the affliction of both. It aids wisdom, does not cause difficulties, and leads to nibbana. If I think and ponder upon these thoughts, even for a night, even for a day, even for a night and day, I see nothing to fear from it. But with excessive thinking and pondering, I might tire my body. And when the body is tired, the mind becomes disturbed. And when the mind is disturbed, it is far from stillness. So I steadied my mind internally, quieted it, brought it to singleness, and concentrated it. Why is that? So that my mind would not be disturbed. Bhikkhus, whatever, or I'll say meditators, whatever a meditator frequently thinks and ponders upon, that will become the inclination of his mind. If he frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of renunciation, then one has abandoned the thought of sensual desire to cultivate the thought of renunciation. And then the mind inclines to thoughts of renunciation. If one frequently thinks and ponders upon thoughts of non-ill will, upon thoughts of non-cruelty, so that's metta and compassion, he has abandoned the thoughts of ill will and cruelty to cultivate the thought of non-cruelty and non-ill will. And then his mind inclines to thoughts of non-ill will and non-cruelty. Now here's a second analogy. So just in the last month of the hot season, when all the crops have been brought inside the villages, a cowherd would guard his cows while staying at the root of a tree or out in the open, since he needs only to be mindful that the cows are there. So too, there was need for me only to be mindful that those states were there. So when we have the thoughts that lead to suffering arising, then we've got to be much more diligent. We have to be making a lot more effort to let them go. Whereas when the positive thoughts are in our mind, then we just have to know they're there. We don't have to think and ponder and about them. We just, we can relax. Just like the cowherd can relax. Once the cows can't destroy the crops, then he can relax. So we can relax and just know, oh, these good thoughts are up there. And tireless energy was aroused in me, and unremitting mindfulness was established. My body was tranquil and untroubled, my mind concentrated and unified. And then he goes on to say that he then entered in the various jhanas and then developed insight and became awakened. It for what I had there. Okay, so that's, I think, a pretty powerful, nice little short, but very powerful, powerful sutta. It comes right before, I might follow up next week with the next sutta, which is number 20, which is the 5 ways to let go of thoughts. So the two go very well together. Okay, so I open it up for discussion.
Interesting. Oops. Oh dear.
Mm-hmm. Here, let me turn it on.
Okay.
Oops, there we go.
Interesting that you went to this sutta today, because I've been following the talks of a woman who is a teacher at Insight Meditation Center. She's giving the morning talks this week, and her subject is letting go or renunciation based on this sutta. One of the points she makes is that letting go is one thing that the way she finds it most useful to phrase this. So renunciation sounds very, it reminds me of monks and religious people who are sacrificing everything. But letting go is something that we do all the time. You can easily recognize letting go of a desire to go and get a fancy new car, or haven't had that for a while, or letting go the desire to spend a night at a nightclub or something, rather than just sort of renouncing pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that struck me is that I guess yesterday she was talking from the house of a friend where she was staying on her travels, and it was a very beautiful house full of lovely decorations. But she said that the thing that she loved about the house is that the owners were not actually clinging to these beautiful pictures and things they had picked up on their travels. They appreciated their beauty, but if a fire, this is in California, so if a fire went and destroyed their house, well, they were just things, and life would not end, they would not be struck by a feeling of tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that the things brought them joy and peace and pleasure and appreciation for the skill of the people that made them, and she felt that was a kind of desire to have a thing like that, while not thinking that the world would end if you didn't have it, was
Mm-hmm.
a kind of nice balance.
Mm-hmm.
I have always played with the idea of a beautiful sunset. I have a desire to see it and appreciate it, but I don't have a desire to stay in that minute forever, because I know it's going to fade and disappear. So you can have joy in things that bring you pleasure while still not clinging to them and not suffering from grasping and greed and desire.
Absolutely. Yeah, they talk about the Buddha when he was on Vulture's Peak enjoying the sunset. Yeah. So. Thanks for all those comments. Yeah.
Talks are on audio dharma, and they're 15-minute little talks, and they're very good.
Who's the speaker this week?
I don't know her name.
It's like,
They're not telling us her name.
oh, okay.
But she is a young woman who sometimes teaches at IMC. Very wise woman.
Yeah, I think this would be a very nice exercise for us to embrace. If you wanted to do it, is you could just have it there by your placemat or something,
Mm-hmm.
just as a little reminder. And then throughout the day, just examine your thoughts and put them into two categories. And then if they're the wanting or ill will, then you can just look at it and say, just examine it. And say, well, is this a wholesome desire? Is this something that's not going to harm self or others? Should I go ahead with it or not? Definitely ill will we want to let go of. Ill will and then cruelty. So we definitely want to let go of that. So it's the first category for not practicing monastics. We're not going to be letting up on all desires. So we're going to examine them. Are they going to be wholesome for us or not?
One more.
Okay.
The other thing, another way to approach it is to look at the beneficial effects of compassion and loving kindness, and also letting go. When you feel thoughts like that, notice how much better you feel, and how good it is for you, and of course for others, and for you and others both. I like to focus on that more than trying to get rid of the negative thoughts, because then I just focus on what I'm doing wrong. But if I can focus on the joy that I feel when I feel metta or compassion, that's encouraging.
Yeah, very good.
It's so the difficulty. Okay, I was walking here, and vandalism. There was like a lawn umbrella from someone's patio thrown into the bush. Okay, so I'm like, vandalism, and it's just that negative mind state of the whole thing. Like, how can people do this, and what's the point of this, and if people would, so I'm in that negative mind state of anger at vandalism. Well, I have a bit of a difficulty of turning that into loving kindness and compassion. I can be loving kind to myself because I don't do vandalism, but I'm in that anger state then, and then it sometimes can expand, and I see other instances of vandalism. So that's a bit difficult to turn that mind state around. And the other reflection I had in this talk was, my gosh, the power of the mind. How did it get to be so powerful?
Yeah. Okay, so that's a really good point for us to discuss. So I think the first thing to recognize is when you're feeling that anger at the vandalism, like, who's that hurting? Is it hurting the vandal, or is it hurting you?
Yeah.
So when we're feeling all of that anger, then we're the one that's suffering. We're pushing our blood pressure. We're distressing our mind. Because walking here, you could have been just feeling, looking at the mountains, feeling the sunshine, all the beauty that was around, and yet your mind state was destroyed, allowing this anger to arise. And who knows where the vandal is? They're not experiencing that mind state at all. they've done their thing. And like the Buddha has several analogies for how to think about people who do bad things like that. He's saying if they have bad actions, so this person had a bad action, but maybe they're pleasant in their speech, then he's saying, well, focus on their speech, not their actions, or vice versa. If their speech is horrible, but they act, they do good things or act really well, then focus on their actions. And then he said if they're both bad, like if they have wrong speech and they do bad actions, unskillful actions, then he said see them as a person in the desert they don't have protective clothing on, they don't have water or food, they're just crawling along on the hot desert, really suffering because they're dehydrated, they're thirsty, they're hungry, they're being burnt to a crisp. Because he said they're likely suffering now, or if they're not suffering, they're going to be reborn in a hell realm, and then they're really going to be suffering.
Yeah.
So it's just like we all do what we do from causes and conditions. So what were the causes and conditions of this person? Did they not experience love in their life? Were they not cared for? Were they deprived? Like, who knows what were the conditions that led to that? Like, we all want to be happy, and so some of us get conditioned to thinking we're going to get our happiness from snatching an umbrella and throwing it in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the big thing I think is to recognize how miserable that made you feel, holding on to that anger, and how it was doing nothing towards stopping this vandal from doing the vandalism. So the only person you were harming was yourself. And then the Buddha's giving these analogies to us to help to conjure up, compassion for the person. Now, certainly when people are doing things wrong, then we have our laws of the land or whatever to deal with people, because we don't want people harming others. And but if if there's something we can do, the goal is to be able to carry that out with equanimity. Thich Nhat Hanh has a beautiful, if you want to give me 2 seconds, maybe I'll run down and get it. He has a beautiful poem called Call Me By My True Names. And I have trouble reading that without crying. But if you want to give me 2 seconds, I'll just run down and find the book.
I also think I didn't see the vandalism, so what actually happened? Maybe they got in a fight and just threw it into the woods by their house. Like, who knows? Like, maybe the wind picked it up and that's where my mind goes, as to, well, I didn't actually see it, so I really have no idea what really happened. We can make up a story of what we think happened.
That's that drifting boat, Kelly. That's great, right? That drifting boat. Who's that person that's driving that way? And
Right.
it's just the wind moving.
Yeah.
It's hard, but it's
And
that's good.
maybe because I've experienced a lot of suffering, that I have compassion for people who do those things. So when I see like a mom in a story yelling at her kid, or when I'm actually experiencing it and seeing it with my own eyes, I'm just like, well, man, they probably weren't loved by their parents, or yeah. But like someone always said to me, well, have you seen Earth? Like, have you seen the whole thing? I'm like, no, actually I don't know if it's flat or round. I haven't personally seen it, Of course there's, whatever, but it's just an extreme example of,
Maya's got a great talk called The Source of Suffering. I don't know if anybody's listened to it, but it sort of says that the cause of suffering is within us. And I know you know all those, but it's like that immediate reaction to sort of see that.
It's like,
it's hard.
darn.
It's hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the ill will that is causing so much of the hatred that the Valhalla person did. It's really, right?
I found it.
Well, the good thing is I didn't hold on to it. I mean, I saw it. It was just an example to share today.
No, it's good.
But I saw it and I felt it, and then I was able to. But I mean, there's so much way worse stuff happening that when it's a way worse situation, I'm more easily to move to that place of, oh, that person must have been, their history must have, if it's like a murder type thing or.
So it's on page 72 of his book of poems, collection of poems called, and so the whole book is called Call Me By My True Names, but one of the poems is titled that. Don't say that I will depart tomorrow. Even today I am still arriving. Look deeply. Every second I am arriving. To be a bud on a spring branch. To be a tiny bird with still fragile wings, learning to sing in my new nest. To be a caterpillar in the heart of a flower. To be a jewel hiding itself in a stone. I still arrive in order to laugh and to cry, to fear and to hope. The rhythm of my heart is the birth and death of all that is alive. I am a mayfly metamorphosing on the surface of the river, and I am the bird that swoops down to swallow the mayfly. I am a frog swimming happily in the clear water of a pond, and I am the grass snake that silently feeds itself on the frog. I am the child in Uganda, all skin and bones, my legs as thin as bamboo sticks, and I am the arms merchant selling deadly weapons to Uganda. I am the 12-year-old girl, refugee on a small boat, who throws herself into the ocean after being raped by a sea pirate. And I am the pirate, my heart not yet capable of seeing and loving. I am a member of the Politburo with plenty of power in my hands, and I am the man who has to pay his debt of blood to my people, dying slowly in a forced labor camp. My joy is like spring, so warm it makes flowers bloom all over the earth. My pain is like a river of tears, so vast it fills the 4 oceans. Please call me by my true names, so I can hear all my cries and laughter at once, so I can see that my joy and pain are one. Please call me by my true names, so I can wake up and the door of my heart could be left open, the door of compassion. This poem was written in 1978 during the time of helping the boat people.
Powerful. Yeah.
It's one of the, this is samsara, and I mean, I think it's one of the sort of insights that I received doing this practice of meditation, was that this is samsara and it's never going to be heaven. Yeah, it's never going to be perfect. It's going to, because of greed, because of delusion, greed, hatred, delusion, there's always going to be negative things that happen in this world. One of my teachers, he said when we see things, he said, his little mantra is, well, what did I expect? You see the umbrella trashed in the woods. What did I expect? It's part of samsara, and so this is a motivation for some to become awakened and not keep doing the round of rebirths back into samsara, back into samsara, back into samsara.
It's interesting when you say that, thinking that what do you expect? Because it's like what do you expect? It sort of feels like a negative thing when you go, oh, what do you expect? What do you expect? And, they'll never change, or that'll never change. They've always been like that. So what do you expect them to be different, right? But we do have expectations of people that we love to be better, to do better. And when they don't, that's hard. But I think, again, if suffering is within us, we have to just remove ourselves sometimes from those situations that won't change. Like you say, it's that just keeps going round and round.
Yeah, I think when we see suffering, because of compassion, then we're often moved to do what we can to, relieve suffering in that situation. But we have to remember that the only person we really have some control over is ourselves, and we're such creatures of our conditioning. We have such strong habit energy. It's hard enough to change ourselves, and so we can offer to help others, but unless they're wanting to embrace it, it's not going to happen. And you don't want to then. We've talked about this in previous sessions where you're wanting to help somebody who doesn't want to be helped, and then you end up getting angry with them. And so it changes from compassion to anger because they're not embracing, but they're just, their habit energy is probably in a point where it's just not allowing them to wake up and make use. So we just want to be careful it doesn't switch from compassion to anger. Cindy?
You can use, what did I expect in the opposite way when something really good happens. You're like, wow, because you don't expect that.
That's good. Yeah. Once in a while. Wow. Watery. Oh, I didn't expect that. Yeah. He held the door for me. Wow, I didn't expect that. Oh, yeah, well, an example.
Yeah, we want to include Jonathan here, so we want him to be able to hear.
Yeah. Just a quick example, we were hiking out and I found someone's driver's license on the trail. So, living up to my name, put it in the mail and sent it to her. And she got it and texted me back, and wow! She wasn't expecting someone to send her driver's license that she forgot or lost, who knows where. So it was, yeah, it was a good thing.
Make much of that.
Yes! I'm gonna milk it, Corey.
Why not?
Yes.
Right. Or the time I was sitting in the market at the hospital auxiliaries craft sale stand, and somebody was coming by with a huge armful of fruit falling out all over the place, and I grabbed my extra shopping bag that I had in my bag and gave it to her, and she said, wow, she didn't expect, but what did you expect? Because there are people with compassion in this world. But what I want to know is, how do I deal with my anger and pain when I am hearing about the horrors in Ukraine or Somalia or other places where my heart cries out with compassion and anger at the people who are inflicting suffering on others. And I'm just an old lady and I can't do anything. And it's just, I can't deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah, so in that situation, like it might be better just to not watch the news. Because all it's doing is stirring up this unrest in your own heart. And like you said, there's nothing you can do about it. Ajahn Brahmali actually talks about the situation in the Ukraine in his most recent 9-day sutta retreat. So if you go to bswa.org, and then if you just put sutta retreat and then click Ajahn Brahmali as the speaker, it'll come up. I think it was May, June of this year. And one of the ones he talks about that, and it's kind of like the comments I made to Kusla just a few moments ago. It's just thinking of the suffering. I mean, of course, our hearts immediately go out with compassion to the people whose homes are being bombed and families being killed and being displaced. But he's encouraging us to also have compassion for, he said, these soldiers, these Russian soldiers, maybe they're soldiers because they had no other jobs open to them, so a job in the military was a way that they could feed their family. Maybe they didn't want to go to war, but it was part, they got sent off, and they're in this situation. They're being given propaganda, being told different things than we're hearing and understanding, and then because of their actions, they're going to probably have a very, nasty rebirth, So anyway, just encouraging us to have compassion for both sides. But for yourself, I would just say stop watching the news. Cindy?
Yeah, because it goes right back to the Majjima Nikaya that you just read, 19, when the Buddha said, those thoughts, they're taking away your stillness.
Mm-hmm.
So go to the place where you have compassion for what's happening and then let it end there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't watched the news for over a decade, but my mind goes to, how do you know what they're telling you is true? I always go to that. Like, yeah, there might be pictures, but I know that the media manipulates things and portrays whatever they want is that on their agenda. And yes, there might be war, there might be bad things happening, but I don't know. There's just something in me that just doesn't trust what the news puts out. They just want people to stay in fear and to, at least that's just, so I always go to, how do I know what's actually really happening?
Well, I have a background deeply connected with the CBC and its reporters. I know a lot of them, and I know that they are doing the best they can to tell the truth, and that they are not interfered with by government or other authorities. So I do trust what they say, because I know that they're trustworthy people.
But they also,
Please include
okay.
Charles Lee and
Yeah.
Jonathan.
I think what Kelly's saying is true, though. I think that we have to have discernment around them, even though, CBC has made some grievous errors around people like Jiangameshi, and there's been so we can't forget those, and so we can't put all our faith into, my partner's son who says, well, what do you, is that all your news source is CBC? And he's right. His news source is really scary, but there's got to be some middle ground somewhere. But it's discernment, I think, and it's hard. But I think Kelly's right, is that we have to question where those sources are coming from, because it is political.
they do what they can not to be, but they
Yeah.
have bosses.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. Good discussion.
I think Sangamita was in a retreat for 3 weeks, and I was watching the monastery, and she come out and she was, they had heard all about the virus, and I had no idea. I'm like, what? I'm just picking you up from the Greyhound or the bus and just totally just doing my practice and working on myself, and yeah, just wanted to comment that because I'm so detached from it. Maybe that's not a good thing. I don't know. It just I get very upset too when I see, you know.
Yeah, I'll jump in. I was thinking about, first off, I just started thinking about Alex Jones and how he was saying that Sandy Hook was fake and now he's getting sued, which I find amusing. But that's like a side trail. But like I'm thinking about how I was listening to Ajahn Sona a while ago, and he made a distinction actually between like non-ill will and metta, and saying that like yeah, like having metta or compassion for like Putin or whatever is like the ideal, but it's enough to just not hate them. And so like I keep that in mind. It's enough to just not hate. And you know, like, and I know for me as well, like, you know, I think about that in relation to Vedana. Of course, like, you know, like metta is like a positive Vedana, non-ill will is a neutral one, and hatred is a unpleasant one, right? So for me, like neutral in general is more difficult to be with, to be still with. You know, I can hate or I can love, but to be at ease and stillness and in neutral is much more challenging, and which is why I think that like even just the idea of cultivating non-ill will or non-hatred is like is almost baffling in a way, and challenging. But I think I'm finding it very rewarding, because there are times when it's, I mean, I guess for me, like being the vandal, being someone that's had a very violent history and done a more horrible things than I would like to frighten you people with. So I'm pretty easily, I can access compassion for people that are also doing horrors, but there's still some that I can't, and so I just try not to hate them. Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of being neutral is moving towards the highest Brahmavihara of equanimity. Yeah. So I think that's very good. Thank you for that point. Yeah.
Well, I include Vladimir Putin in my metta practice because I think that healing of people like that is our only hope. The only hope for our society and for Mother Earth.
Mm-hmm.
So I do keep him in there. It may take a bit of a stretch, but he needs to be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, someone who's suffering as well in power is not a good combination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all for a wonderful discussion, and I think we're on a 5th week, so we're going to end with our poem that we just do on 5th weeks.
Can't we miss him?
Yeah, yeah.
So this is the guided meditation on letting go, the other word for renunciation. So one of the good thoughts to keep in mind. And this was written by Ben Matlock, a student of Thich Nhat Hanh's. Breathing in, I see the need I have to control my life. Breathing out, I let go of the need to control my life. Breathing in, I see that control is an illusion. Breathing out, I relax in my inability to control. Breathing in, I see how critical I am of myself. Breathing out, I let go of the need to be critical. Breathing in, I see all the goodness in me. Breathing out, I relax in the knowledge of the goodness in me. Breathing in, I see the many ambitions I have for myself. Breathing out, I let go of the many ambitions I have for myself. Breathing in, I see that I am sufficient in all ways. Breathing out, I relax in knowing that I am sufficient in all ways. Breathing in, I see that I crave many things. Breathing out, I let go of the need to crave many things. Breathing in, I see that I have enough. Breathing out, I relax in the knowledge that I have enough. Breathing in, I see that I am too busy. Breathing out, I let go of the need to be too busy. Breathing in, I want a less hectic life. Breathing out, I relax in the quiet of this moment. Breathing in, I see that letting go can make me free. Breathing out, I am free. Breathing in, I see that by being free, I can be happy. Breathing out, I am happy. May the merit of our practice be shared with all sentient beings, named and unnamed. Blair, Rees, Kelly. May all beings be well and happy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you.